joining me on another episode of Technically Speaking. As you know it, we strive to highlight those who are trailblazing in the technology industry and a glimpse of them sharing their role with us. Today, I have with me Tameka Vasquez. She is the Assistant Vice President of Marketing at a high-tech global solutions firm. She's also a marketing and business strategist who loves researching cognitive technologies along with the future of business. So, I want to have you speak to a marketing technology expert to share some gems with us. Thank you for coming on today, Tameka. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm good.
All right. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you become the trailblazer that we see today?
So I've spent the past 10 years in marketing strategy and business development strategy roles, mostly in the high-tech sector. So kind of working with technology companies who are introducing like new products to the marketplace or who are just offering technology related services to the market. So that's kind of been, for the most part, the past 10 years of my life. And in between that, like I do have a passion for education. So I do teach at universities part-time. Whenever I can take a semester off, I do that. So yeah, that's about me.
All right. That's awesome. You out here educating everyone as well, too. That's really important. I think that's great. I love that. Love it, love it, love it. What do you think is the most important part of your career? Because you're honing in on marketing. You're an expert in marketing, but honing in on technology. So what do you feel like is the most important part of your role?
Ooh, I think the most important part of my role actually is the education piece, because when it comes to people developing products, it's very hard for them to say, okay, how do we, get people excited about this? How do we get people wanting to use this? How do we create loyalty and how do we create a community around this? So I actually feel like the most important part of my job has always been the education piece, like making sense of the actual technology that you're trying to introduce to people, putting it into the context of like their day-to-day life, and getting them to actually understand the core benefits, how this could facilitate different things that might be part of their day-to-day or business decisions that they have to make. So that's actually, I think the part that marketers, we get caught up in the creative stuff and, that's great. But the core of what we're doing is educating the marketplace.
That is so true. And I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I think when people think of marketing, they think about creatives and creating campaigns and the look and feel of things. Yes, all those things are really important too, but also understanding the technology behind it is really the key piece of marketing technology. So I'm so glad that you brought that up, because education is key. You should school a lot of these marketers out here, because that is a different story for different times.
It's like they don't tell you that stuff in school. So if you're like me, I never took a marketing class a day in my life, right? So there was no preconceived notions about what this career path was meant to be. So, I don't blame school, but they kind of don't, they don't really tell people the full extent of where marketing is today in school. And I see that with my students. So, I don't blame people who don't know that, but it is something critical if you really want to make a career out of this.
Yeah, that's so true. And I'm noticing now too, even with a lot of marketing jobs that are currently out on the market, they require you to have some sort of sense of technology, whether it's of HTML, of research, or, they want you to have so much because, marketing automation is a big thing right now.
Yes.
So they're requiring you to have some sort of a technical skill, or at least the ability to be able to learn.
Exactly.
So with that being said, how marketing and technology is a marriage in a sense. How would you categorize the state of marketing technology right now? Because I feel like there are some marketers who are trying to future-proof their careers and okay, I need to learn all this technology. What am I doing? How do I go about doing it? Do you feel like the market is becoming oversaturated, or what do you feel like the current state of marketing technology?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. It is definitely saturated, but I wouldn't let that be the deterrent. I would say the current state if we actually just look at it from a historical standpoint, marketing began as sort of word of mouth, right? That's the oldest and truest form of marketing, is me telling a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend. Now, what we've tried to do with the introduction of digital technology is to replicate that. So we're all about, volume. Now we're all about kind of getting data points from the volume. We're trying to understand like what makes people, tick, what makes them react on an emotional level, but also in terms of buying decisions. So I feel like the current state of marketing technology is kind of noisy because of that, because everybody is trying to nail that down. Like, how do we get to know our customers in the most streamlined way possible? Whether that means that we're seeing the ways that they're interacting online, whether that means that we're capturing things that they're doing, like actions that they're taking on our platforms, on our website, in our shopping cart, whatever it may be. We're trying to get a better sense of that two-way communication between brand and consumer, and at the same time trying to replicate that kind of word of mouth methodology. So I think the current state is, still left to be seen, because new issues have been introduced. When you think about privacy concerns, for instance, when you think about like personalization, right? Yeah. There are these like cool things that we can do now as marketers by way of just getting to know people better and capturing more data. But we're not always in a space of being, I guess, thoroughly honest about what we're doing with that information and what we're doing with that data. So I think when you look at privacy, when you look at personalization, when you look at all of the things that we want to allow people to customize in their experience, there are so many things that you need to be able to parse out to say, what business decisions am I trying to drive? Like, what objectives am I actually trying to achieve? And are these technologies helping me to get there? Or am I just using these technologies because it's the thing to do? It's the latest trend, to use something that's about personalization, or to use something that has a little bit of AI in it. Like, do you understand what you're actually trying to achieve? I think if you can sort of, answer that question as a marketing leader, it then allows you to kind of cut through the noise of marketing technology a lot more and be able to use it to your best advantage. So I would say that's kind of the state of things, and kind of like where you need to sit in the state of things if you want to build, a career as a marketing leader.
You tapped on my next question a little bit, which it leads into this. So, you talked about all these tools and, how things need to align with like your business strategies, like what is the end goal, things like that. So how do you ensure like your marketing technology stack is aligning with the business strategies?
Yeah, if you look at business strategy as a whole, it requires the kind of perspective to the long term, where you can say, are we building, familiarity for the long term? What we're offering, is it resonating with the market, and will it continue to for the long term? Are we generating sales that are repeated or have some, cycle to them for the long term? If you look at those kinds of like, hardcore business sort of metrics, and you apply that layer of marketing to it, what you very quickly realize is most technologies allow one-way communication, but they might not necessarily allow for learning, where you can apply some sort of a feedback loop. And this is more of like product language, but ultimately you want to be able to very quickly test what people think about something. Then you want to be able to bring that back into how you implement a full-blown marketing campaign, let's say. Then you want that campaign to actually teach you something that guides the strategy. So if what you're doing is not teaching you anything that's going to drive further long-term marketing strategy, then you're just kind of using the technology for the technology's sake, and it becomes very sort of one way instead of it being a dialogue between, again, business and consumer. So there is not a single business goal, whether it's, to expand the product portfolio, whether it's to expand into an international market, whether it's to gain, kind of like a long-term share of voice. There is not a single business goal that does not have a marketing component to it, but the marketer needs to be able to say, okay, what questions am I actually trying to answer? And is this technology allowing for a two-way kind of communication? Is it allowing for a feedback loop? And if it's not, then it's kind of like more of a nice to have. That's kind of how I see it.
You see how you're dropping all these gems? Like,
I don't know if I am, hopefully.
You are, as I feel like a lot of marketers in the industry who are not, aware of like technology and the impact it has within the marketing world, they lack that type of knowledge. And I feel like that's how a lot of these legacy companies aren't succeeding within their marketing campaigns. And they want to know like, hey, well, we're not hitting our, KPIs or, and it's just like, well, you have these people over here who it's like, yeah, this Harvard degree is cool, but, do they know anything about technology? Do they know really how to optimize your marketing campaign, leveraging, technology and things like that? And, I feel like you could offer so much to so many of these companies, girl. Like,
we'll see. I mean, the main thing is they're not listening.
that's the problem.
You'd be surprised, some of the largest and most, well-known brands in the world oftentimes are not revisiting, some of their core customers and actually doing some listening. And I think a lot of the times it's just because you get into a comfortable space. If you are a well-known brand, you might think like, well, what am I actually marketing? But what they fail to realize is the more you kind of get comfortable in that seat, there's always a disruptor. There's always a startup. There's always somebody with some kind of idea, even if it's not a business, but somebody with an idea that fundamentally shakes up the way that you interact with your customers and the way you treat them. So you have to be a listener. You have to pay attention. And I feel like that's the only reason we even see like, these big companies not really getting it right. It's because they're kind of comfortable.
Yeah. And it's easy. It's easy to get really comfortable, especially if your same old marketing campaign has worked for the last 50 years. They're like, yeah, well, I don't see anything with it now. I don't see anything wrong with it now. But it's just like, no, the way how the world is going, millennials and Gen Z is really making that impact. And we are not necessarily following the trends of a 50-year-old marketing campaign. We're looking to disrupt all avenues.
Yeah, exactly.
So what are some like categories or like tools of marketing tech, like the traction that produces the most value in your opinion?
It depends on the industry that you're in, right? So I'm in the B2B world. I'm in a professional services environment. We're providing high-tech solutions ultimately. So it really depends on like what sector you're in. So if you're in a B2B capacity, I mean, you need to really be able to look at, basic tools like Salesforce, basic, fundamental kind of go-to-market tools like Salesforce. You also need to kind of be able to look at marketing automation technologies, but only the ones that are going to actually allow you to integrate your points of communication between, let's say, email, back to Salesforce, pulling information from your website, if people are filling out forms, things like that. So it's kind of just creating, I guess, a sense of, workflow. So like you start here, you go here next, you end up there. But me as the marketer, I'm capturing all those movements along the way, and I'm able to provide some sort of reaction to it. So if you're in the B2B world, a lot of that is critical, mainly because you're not really in a to sell something on a shelf. So you're not in a position where I can go to the checkout part and just quickly buy something. B2B sales cycles can be 6 months, it can be a year. I've seen sales cycles as long as 2 years. So in that 6 months, year, 2 years, are you issuing regular communication? Are you educating the market? Are you building relationships? And all of the tools that you use kind of, lead to that end. So Salesforce, marketing automation tools, email campaign tools, certainly anything on the analytics front, getting a sense of customer journeys on your website and on your social entities is very important. Shareability, you want to make sure people can actually share the information that they're receiving with their own contacts. So facilitating that interaction, I think, is critical. So it's mainly that.
So you've had thought leadership combos around the future of work for the past 5 years now. We are at it now. We are here. The future of work is here. It's present. I'm more than sure you are not necessarily tired, not the quite word I'm looking for, but you kind of more so want to say, I told y'all this already. I hate repeating myself. So, yeah. What is one tidbit of advice that you can offer around the future of work? Because we are here and it is not 2030 like people were, predicting, like, oh yeah, it's just combos to be having. No, it's now here, present, and companies have to move fast.
Yeah. So I've been working remotely for like on and off for about 3 years now. And yes, I've been talking about like the future of work stuff for a while. But one of the lessons I'm still learning, and one of the skills that I'm still trying to gain, is to how to actually foster team collaboration virtually, right? So I actually think no matter where people are in their career, but even if you're not managing a team, it's just very important to know how to establish a certain executive presence virtually and to know how to collaborate with people at all levels virtually. Because now, that we're in this space, you're not wearing a suit every day. You're not, at your desk. You're not able to portray that, in an organic fashion. So you have to be able to recreate that experience of professionalism and all of that stuff right in your home, when they can hear your dog barking in the background, when they see your boyfriend walking up and down past the screen,
right?
So you need to be able to kind of think about what are the ways that I can sort of exude that professional presence, that executive presence in a virtual setting while still just being a person, being a human being. And what are the ways that I can foster team collaboration? Like, how do I make brainstorming fun, when we're not necessarily in a room together? Or how do I help people be part of critical decisions that have to get made? Meaning there's deadlines, meaning, there are components that I need to be accurate, like how do you instill those things in a virtual setting? So that's something, I would advise anybody not to take for granted that just because you're on the phone or just because, you turn on your screen on video, that automatically means that people have a sense of you. So you need to be able to be a little bit more intentional about what side of you do you want people to remember and see while we're in this kind of future of work space where everybody's virtual. Another thing I would think about is, while we're in this virtual setting, and this is more on a personal note, like how do you decipher between things that should be meetings versus things that should be emails? Versus things that could just be a quick catch up. Like, I think now that, I've been working remotely for a little while, but I have a lot of colleagues and I have people, around me that have not necessarily been in this virtual space. And what I find is that people think because they can't see you that they can't just pick up the phone or they can't just send you a quick email. They think everything needs to be this formal, let's set 30 minutes on the calendar kind of vibe. Right. So I would definitely say, just kind of getting a sense of your actual day and how it's actually being spent. It can very easily, seep into your personal life if you're not careful. I've learned this the hard way. Just being in a virtual, kind of workforce, if you're not able to say how you're spending your time, morning, afternoon, are you a morning person? Are you a night person? It doesn't matter in the future of work. It doesn't matter in a virtual setting, but you need to be able to kind of understand where your time is best spent and how it's best spent, and then respect other people's time as well. So just basic, etiquette, calendar management, basic knowing what medium is best to communicate certain things, knowing there are boundaries that should be applied. Again, I manage people that have that live in different time zones. So I need to know, is it 8 o'clock for them? Is it too late? Is it too early? So just those things are just basic everyday things, but I think it's something we shouldn't take for granted now that we're kind of all finally in this space.
Yeah, we're all finally in this space. I knew it was, me and you both knew that it was coming sooner rather than later, but yes. A lot of these companies are like struggling to like figure it out. And it's just like, what happened? Like, who dropped the ball? Like, why are you just figuring this out? Like, hello, these conversations have been in the ecosystem for so long about the future of work. And here we are last minute with companies like, oh my God, well, we don't have the proper infrastructure. Yeah. Especially like our education, but like the education sector, like the school systems, I think they did the best that they could. So I'm not going to talk negative about it, but I bet they'll be more prepared for next year. Because like some of the kids, when they have like some of the schoolwork assignments, it's like they just went to like Google Classroom and uploaded something. And it's like, hey, create a paper house using these tools. What?
Right.
Like, we're not in the classroom.
Yeah, it needs to be translated.
Yeah, so, I just think no one was really prepared, even though these conversations have been floating around for probably almost a decade.
But you know what it is that nobody considers this to be like a global ecosystem when it comes to virtual collaboration, virtual work. Everybody thought this was just going to be a tech company thing, like a tech industry thing.
Right.
So nobody was really prepared to kind of look at the things that tech companies have been able to take advantage of. They're able to hire people in other countries, you know, they're able to get the best and the brightest innovation and innovative minds from wherever they are, simply because they did not make a border a restriction. Like geography was not a barrier to entry, like basic things like that. I think they're finally waking up that it wasn't just a bunch of rebellious millennials that didn't want to go to an office, or that, you know, didn't want to sit at a desk, or, you know, anything like that. It's just, there are many different types of ways to work, the same way there are many different types of ways to learn. And I think finally, you know, people are slowly starting to see like, oh, these tech companies, this tech industry was onto something. So, you know, it'll take them a while, but they'll get there.
As we're wrapping up, what is like one key piece of advice that you want to give to those who are looking to pursue a career in marketing technology, or becoming that marketing expert and honing in on tech?
Yeah, I mean, you know, like I said earlier, I never took a marketing class. So I definitely think I have a lot of, you know, advice, just because I was a newbie at one point as well. So I would definitely say stay curious. And I mean that in a very intentional way, like actually be a constant student, learning what's going on in the world, what's going on with different trends, what's happening in the political landscape that's going to impact you. You just need to be very curious about the wider world around you. I think that is absolutely the first thing that I would say. Outside of that, I would say tighten up on skills that people just take for granted these days, like writing. You know, it drives me insane that we sacrifice writing quality now for speed, because we want to be the first to say something, but make sure there's a semicolon where there needs to be a semicolon, you know? So I would definitely not take for granted just writing skills, the technical components of writing, but also the creative components of writing, like practicing that, gaining that muscle, I think is really important. Outside of that, I would say the funny thing is, I actually think the least important thing to know is the technology itself. Because if you don't really know the technology itself, you're more than likely going to start to think about what questions do you need to answer. You're more than likely going to have a strategic mindset first, and then you apply the technology later based on what you're trying to achieve. So it's probably less important to know all of the possible technologies of marketing up front. It's more important for you to understand what are the moving forces in the markets right now, what are consumers interested in, what might people want to buy in the near future, and that's across B2B and B2C. You know, where am I in the midst of all that? Am I curious about any particular things? Can I articulate what those things mean? You know, can I make it simple for other people to understand? All of those skills are things that people take for granted. Oh, another thing I would say is, if you can understand kind of human psychology, that is a lost skill. Back in the day, to be a marketer, you had to understand basic fundamentals of psychology. You had to understand the fundamentals of sociology. And now we don't do that anymore. So it would definitely, I think, help you stand out if you go back to those tried and true, like social sciences, if you're interested in a career in marketing, because it doesn't matter what industry you get into, understanding those things, being curious, being well-read, and being able to, like I said, put pen to paper when need be, are skills that nobody can replace.
I think those are all awesome skill sets that could be probably used across various industries.
Probably.
I think a lot of us forgot the basics, and going back to the basics is so important. Yeah, so thank you for that.
Of course.
So what is your personal mantra that you like to live by?
So I think I have two. Okay. The first one is, I truly believe what you think of yourself is what you are. And so I really remind myself that as much as I can. You know, it's not like an everyday thing, but as much as I can, I try to remind myself that I'm not to be defined by the world, by any external kind of forces. I am to be the primary, definer, if that's even a word, of myself. Like, I have to be the one that holds the definition of what it means to be me. That way, nobody else can kind of disrupt that space. So that would be like the first thing, like what you think of yourself is what you are. The second thing is kind of on the back of that. Once you figure out who you are, and that evolves, but once you have a general sense of who you are, what you care about, what your values are, everything else can be Googled. Like, I don't know who told me this one day, but they literally said, find yourself and everything else can be Googled. And I don't even know if they plagiarized somebody. I have no idea. But I love that phrase, and I genuinely live by that, because it puts me in a space of not being worried about what I don't know, but just being worried about, okay, am I putting myself in a learning environment? Am I putting myself around the right people? Am I being positive and ready to face whatever challenges come to me? Everything else can be Googled. The technology can be Googled. The frameworks can be Googled. Anything else that you need to learn can be acquired over time, but the fundamental begins with understanding yourself.
One of my favorite things to say, especially in a working environment, when people ask me questions that can be Googled, and my response is always, Google is your best friend.
It's free.
It's free, and it'll never let you down. Google's your best friend, my dear.
Yes.
One last question before we head out, kind of more like a fun fact. What is the last thing you Googled?
The last thing I'm like, what is not too embarrassing? The last thing.
Be truthful here. Be truthful.
No, legit, the last thing I Googled was, I like to watch, I don't watch a lot of TV, but I'm really into Billions. That show on Showtime. So I'm really into that show. And I Googled like some of the terminology that they use on the show. If you don't understand it, it's hard to follow like what the drama is. So it was dark pools, because Axe was the main character was talking about, trading in the dark pools. And I'm over here like, is that even a thing? So I actually Googled to see if that was a thing. It is a thing. It's a scary thing. It's also legal. So that was my fun fact today.
Okay. All right. Well, I thank you so much for joining this episode of Technically Speaking. How can everyone find you?
So Instagram, Tameka _Vasquez, LinkedIn, Tameka Vasquez, Twitter, Tameka Vasquez. Like I'm probably the only Tameka Vasquez out there. So if you just search for me on any channel, you should be able to find me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today. And I look forward. Oh yeah, of course. I look forward to following your continued journey of success and leadership.
Let's hope. Thank you.